Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight we've got episode 3 of our Halloween special. We're joined again by Dr. Brian Santana, Kelli Brink, and Jayson Blair. We're going to do something different tonight, and I'm really excited about this personally. We are going to go around and picture a campfire, a virtual campfire, and we are going to be telling some true crime stories. So, Kelli, I believe you're on the block. What story do we have for you?
Well, I'm going to be telling you the story of the Villisca Axe Murders. Are you ready?
I'm ready now.
Oh boy. I'll dive right into it. All right. Tonight I'm diving into a case that hits close to home for me, literally, because it happened right here in Iowa where I live. It's the Villisca Axe Murders of 1912. Picture a small, quiet town plunged into darkness, a family asleep, and an axe wielding shadow creeping through the night. Buckle up because this one is gruesome. It's mysterious and even haunted. So let's set the scene. It's June 9th, 1912, in Villisca, Iowa, a sleepy farming town of about 2,000 people. The Moore family, Josiah, Sarah, their 4 kids, and their 2 youngest guests, the Stillinger sisters, are tucked into bed after a late night church event. The town is pitch black, not just because it's late, but also because Villisca's lights were out that night. They had been shut off due to a dispute between the city and the utility company, which cloaked everything in extra darkness. No one hears anything, no screams, no struggle, but sometime between midnight and 5 a.m., someone enters the house with an axe. The next morning, a neighbor, Mary Peckham, notices that the house is just a little too quiet. And by 8 a.m., she's worried enough that she alerts Josiah's brother. Inside, they find an absolute bloodbath. All 8 people, Josiah, Sarah, their kids, Herman, Mary, Arthur, Paul, plus the 2 Stillinger girls, are dead, bludgeoned with an axe. The killer used the sharp end on Josiah, hacking his face beyond recognition. But for the others, it was a little different. He used the blunt side of the axe as if the killer wanted to prolong the brutality. Blood soaked the beds, the walls, the floors, and the murder weapon was Josiah's own axe. It was left in the guest room, still dripping with blood. Investigators noted clear signs of inappropriate sexual contact or molestation involving one of the Stillinger girls, the 12-year-old Lena, and it's likely that that happened after her death. And here's where it gets a little weirder. The killer covered the mirrors, all the mirrors and the windows in the house, with blankets, locked the doors, and pulled down the shades like he was staging this grim ritual. And there was a slab of bacon. Yeah, bacon. It was found near the axe, as if the killer was like toying with the scene in some way. No one was ever convicted of this crime. The suspects ranged from a drifter to a local preacher, but the case remains unsolved. But that's not all. Let's talk about why this case still haunts Villisca and me. So, the Moore House, it's not just a crime scene, it's a paranormal hotspot, actually. The Villisca Axe Murder House is widely regarded as one of the most haunted houses in America. The house has been featured on shows like Ghost Adventures, Scariest Places on Earth, and Paranormal Witness. It's often ranked alongside sites like the Amityville Horror House or the Lizzie Borden House on America's lists of most haunted places. People say the air feels heavy, like the tragedy's weight never left the house. Visitors report hearing children's laughter, footsteps on the stairs, doors slamming on their own. Some swear they've seen shadowy figures or felt cold spots in the bedrooms. The Stillinger sisters' spirits are said to linger there, especially in the guest room where they died. And here's another wild part. I've stayed in this house twice around Halloween with a team of podcasters and paranormal investigators. We used all sorts of spirit detecting equipment like EMFs and digital voice recorders and Ouija boards, dowsing rods, pendulums, pretty much everything. Um, while we were there, toys would light up on their own. Balls would kind of roll around in a way that seemed unnatural. But one of the weirdest parts was our recordings after we got home. There were
Sounds like just another night in my living room.
Is it haunted? Just balls.
I'm here. What do you think?
Unnatural balls. Oh my god! But yeah, it was creepy. You know, locals say it's definitely haunted, but to me, do I think it's haunted? Well, I'm a skeptic, so I really don't. But the Villisca Axe Murders, they're not just a cold case. They're a wound really that never healed. The brutality, the mystery, the lingering spirits make this house a chilling reminder that some crimes echo beyond the grave. So next time you're in Iowa and you're looking for a dark tourism location, I would skip the overnight stay, but maybe go check out the Villisca Axe Murder House.
That's just so funny that you can actually rent it out and
yeah,
spend the night.
it used to be owned forever, for years and years, by this little old lady named Martha and a guy named Johnny Hauser, who used to work with Ghost Adventures, the show, lived right next door, and he was kind of the caretaker. So when you'd rent it, you would have to actually call Martha and rent it and mail her a check in the mail to rent the house. But now it's been purchased in the last year by one of those really big companies that does, like, you know, the haunted locations and stuff like that. So
it's the most interesting thing I've ever heard out of Iowa.
What year was this again, Kelly?
1912, and it's kind of tied to a string of axe murders throughout the country around that time. I don't know if you've read the book The Man from the Train by Bill James. It goes into great detail about the axe murders and other ones that could have been done by the same perpetrator, and it's a really good, it's kind of like a boring historical book, but it's great. Like,
I'm sure Brian will love it.
Did they make any progress on the case? Like, what actually, any progress on the case?
There have been a lot of suspects. So a German
Israel
immigrant...
Keys.
Yeah.
Too young.
I agree with Bill James.
Don't underestimate Israel Keys.
He goes way back. Yeah. I agree with Bill James, though, from the book Man from the Train. He thinks it was a German immigrant named Paul Mueller. There was a very similar...
Always the Germans.
Yes.
There was
the immigrants.
Yeah. There was a very similar...
Have you ever heard the crazy story of the Kaifek murders?
That's what I was going to say.
Yes!
In Germany, Hinterkaifeck.
Hinterkaifeck
murders. Yes. So that
is a story. That is a story.
It sure is. And it was probably the same, very likely the same person who did that.
Yes, because he was the neighbor, right? Like, Paul Mueller was a neighbor in the Hinterkaifeck.
Not in the Villisca case, but I think in the Hinterkaifeck, he was somehow tied to that.
That story is something else. I was trying to make an argument to my colleague at work who's German. I was like, you people are crazy. And she was like, what are you talking about? And I gave her 2 podcast episodes on the Hinterkaifeck murder. And I was like, you find that relatively normal.
Yeah. No big deal.
Something I think is something interesting about this is, so like modern day, people were kind of going and doing these ghost hunts and stuff like that. I keep wondering, I've heard of so many cases from 1970 up until like more recently of police investigators utilizing psychics or other people like as a last resort in some of these cold cases in a way that always surprises me.
Me too.
But one of the things I think is interesting was this case in 1912, though, was there any effort at the time? Were they doing stuff like that as in the investigation?
Like the spiritualism movement?
Yeah, the spiritualism itself was big, but was that incorporated, I wonder, into like police investigations in a way that it's going to be much later in like specific cases where it pops up?
Not that I know of, but that's a good question.
I do not think I would put a caveat on what you said. I don't think psychics are like last resort. I think they often come up in high profile cases relatively early. To your point, I do think like, there have been a bunch of murders from the 70s. I used to guest on this really cool podcast called Vintage Villains, and I sort of became, I don't know, I would say serial killer kind of guy, crazy murder kind of guy. But a lot of psychics in the cases. And I really did a bunch of episodes on the 70s. I was like the 70s person. And tons of psychics involved early in those cases. And even now, like, investigators are open to some, like when you have a case that's tough to solve, it doesn't hurt to listen to any well-meaning person.
I believe that. Look at our CIA. I mean, they have whole entire grant-funded things about paranormal and telepathy and
for stuff. For example, like a person could think they're psychic, and maybe they are. Yeah. I don't know. I don't rule it out. But let's say they're not, and they're just really intuitive. And they're good at putting together clues in their subconscious. Like, I wouldn't turn that away. A highly intuitive, experience-based person. You think you're a psychic? Maybe you are. Maybe you're not. But you may be able to make connections that other people can't.
I feel like this is the way I would get more done as a researcher, to tell them I'm psychic or something. But how are they getting into some of these inside like case details when it's hard as a researcher to file records requests and not get access?
Brian, who's the one on Montel Williams?
Oh yeah, I mean, Cameron and I are researching a case right now, and the psychic
Suzanne.
We're in touch with the family, and the psychic Sylvia Brown actually got really involved in this case, to the point that she gave them a person that she thought was responsible that was in a different country, and the North Carolina SBI, based on that, paid to send agents to another country based on Sylvia Brown's advice.
That's mind blowing. Yeah. Maybe they know something we don't. Like,
it didn't go anyplace, but it was they did follow up on it. So, I guess my point was, it's interesting because in this moment, at the turn of the century, there is this huge resurgence of like spiritualism and the occult, and it's interesting that like Jayson said, it's more common now. We'll listen to that. I wonder if in any of these early cases that was coming up,
probably
where that was something that police, whatever that procedure might have looked like in 1912 in Iowa, in this area, like investigation. I mean, and the other thing was like, what about this pastor? It's interesting, this like an immigrant or like a pastor, like a pillar of the community or an outsider. Like
so this pastor was not a pillar of the community at all. Okay. Reverend George Kelly was his name, and he was a total pervert. He put like ads in the paper for secretaries, but like he wanted them to work in the nude or just in lingerie. And at the time, think of how risque that would have been. So, and he was a known window keeper.
I think of today, and I think of how risque that would be. I'm just trying to think.
Was this like as a church secretary or something that they were like doing like?
That's not common in churches.
Well, no, he was a reverend, but he was just kind of like the black sheep of his family, and he traveled around to different churches and stuff. I think he was just like a wealthy man who was a charlatan, basically. But that's why he was a suspect. But no, I think he might, and I should know this, but I think at one point he may have confessed too. But I don't think he was the guy. So, but speaking of like the crime scene and the investigation, back with both the cases I'm going to talk about tonight, at the time, such a sensationalized case, you know. The whole town would come to the scene, and they were all looking for, like, they'd see blood and they'd grab this and grab that from the crime scene as a souvenir. People were so morbid back then. I mean, they still are. There's whole podcasts about it, but people were like taking things from the crime scene, trampling through the crime scene, and made a big mess of it. So
and it's an interesting thing that's like a part of our history, long running. I don't know if this is an American thing or it's broader, but you know, I remember reading about a lot of lynchings, and one of the things that you would do is you'd collect a piece of which brings me to a case that's coming from me, but but you would collect a piece of the person, but not just in that, like souvenirs from murder homes, you know, serial killers selling their stuff.
Serial killer art is big.
Yeah.
Oh, big. Have
That's
you guys
big, but like even bigger than that, if you want like top dollar, like get something from, you know, that leaks
Like
out
a
of a
crime
forensic
scene.
lab or something along those lines that you can get your hands on a cold serial killer case.
Have you guys been to the Grave Face Museum in Savannah, Georgia?
No.
Oh, they also call it the Serial Killer Museum, but they have the largest collection of John Wayne Gacy's paintings and artwork of anywhere else. So they have all sorts of stuff like that. But
Have like Ed Kemper's audiobooks, John
I'm
Gacy's
pretty
movies.
sure they did have an Ed Kemper section. Like every like really well-known serial killer, they've got something. So it being Halloween. So I used to I've rented the place twice, and it was always like as close to Halloween as I could get. Lauren from Paradise After Dark came 1 year or two, I can't remember, but like we live streamed from it. And
So cool.
I'm a skeptic, though. Would you guys be scared to stay in a place like that where such an awful thing happened, or would you welcome
Not
it?
until like things started moving or the
Yeah.
Ouija board started to
Whatever, sounds like fun.
It actually
Sounds like
was fun. We treated it like a fun, like sleepover.
If
We
you're gonna
had
go out, Ghosts and Goblins would be a fun way to go. I mean,
yeah.
There are
we're all
some
gonna
funny
die.
YouTube shows about it. Like guys
Mhm.
will go in there and set up their equipment, and they're like, "Oh, look, this toy is moving."
They did. So I'm gonna blame like the angle of the boards in the floor of the attic and stuff, but like in the attic, they have all these toys and balls and stuff set up. I've never seen a ball move that way before, but it was like it would kind of jerk its way across. Like I did actually witness some creepy stuff, but I try to find a way to explain it away with science somehow, but it was creepy. We made it so much more creepy with the tools we were using, and like there's like static and weird radio voices and stuff on these ghost detectors. They just sound creepy anyway if there's nothing there. So, and it was dark. There's no power in the house. It was fun. Do you guys believe in ghosts or residual hauntings or anything like that?
I do.
You do?
Chris Sousa, who is a paranormal investigator, and he hosts, what is it? The haunted. It's not the haunted house, but anyway, he's based in Savannah. But he made a very good point on my podcast. He's like, you know, ghost stories. What are ghost stories most associated with? Love. A loved one coming back to send a message to someone, or you sending a message to that someone. And I remember after my mom died in 2003, I remember this one vivid moment where I was laying on my couch and I looked up and it was like she was there. Now, my mind playing tricks on me or whatever. And she had a message for me. And it was a good message. It was a cool message. It was a brief message. But I began to think, like, whether it's happening inside my own head or it is an external force, these things are real for us, particularly the things that we cannot process easily, that we cannot handle easily or understand. You know, whether they truly are external or it's just something in your mind, I believe they're real. So.
My dad's visited me in my dreams like 3 times, and it's always a message like, your car is a piece of shit. Why are you driving this? Or
He's
like,
the
I
same
like
messages.
this guy. You should date him. It's always some bad thing.
So I've had to search funeral homes at night, like when during break-ins and whatnot, and talk about a freaky place to be.
Yeah.
Like, go
Also, a
walk through one
weird
of those
place to
where
do
they-
a break-in too.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're waiting for
What were
someone
they
to pop
trying
out
to
the
do?
coffin.
Yeah.
My grandma ran a funeral home when I was little, and
Explains
I
so much.
I hated it. It does explain a lot, actually. I saw a few dead bodies before, like when I was like
Before you
4.
shut up. Yes, right.
It was not. It was scary, but it shaped who I am today.
I like that story. Everyone
Yeah.
should also check.
All
it
right. Well, hey, Brian, you're up next. What do we have?
So this is a Halloween related case. This is the 2001 Halloween disappearance of Cindy Song near Penn State University. Are you all familiar with this at all?
Mm-mm.
No.
So it's interesting. At Penn State, I feel like there could be a book about cold cases tied to Penn State University, and it would be bigger. I'm always discovering new cases tied to Penn State, it seems like. But this was 2001. This was Cindy Song. I'm using the name that she went by. I don't want to attempt her original Korean name without having some pronunciation guide here. But she was a 21-year-old international. You can wave your hand, Jayson, but I'll let you try to say it. But like she was a 21-year-old.
The key is you just make it up and say it with confidence.
Okay.
100%.
So, Hyun Jong Song was a 21-year-old. That doesn't sound too bad, right? So
Yeah, no, not at all.
she was a 21-year-old international exchange student from South Korea. So she was studying at Penn State University, and she was majoring in English. She was described as reserved by her friends, and she lived alone in an apartment that was just off campus. She had just moved off campus. She was originally going to live on campus, but said that she wanted to have some independence and kind of get that both the college experience, but also have some kind of adult kind of independent experience living away from her family in Korea and stuff. So this takes place on October 31st, 2001. So she had attended a lively costume party on Penn State's campus. This was at the Lion's Den nightclub, which is on campus. And she was dressed as a Playboy bunny in a black leotard, fishnet stockings, and bunny ears. And her last confirmed sighting was at 2:30 in the morning following the party. She was, some of the witnesses reported that she left the club arm in arm with a male acquaintance who the police did later clear, and they described him as cleared. And a cab driver dropped her off at her apartment around 4 a.m. That's the last sighting that we know for sure. The cab driver did note that she paid with cash and that he watched her walk towards the building and go in without any issue. So the next day around 9 a.m., her roommate, who was also out, returned home, and she got to the apartment and she noticed that there was Cindy's, some of her costume was laying on the ground. She saw her bunny ears, the high heels. They were neatly folded and they were draped over a chair that was close to the door where she presumed that she walked in, and that there was no signs of a forced entry. There was nothing that was disturbed about the scene, and no one really thought too much about it until Cindy missed her class the next day. And then she also missed her work shift at the university library the next day. This is November 1st. And then also a planned lunch with friends. So we have multiple people that are voicing concern both at the university and her friend circle, and they eventually kind of call the police and let them know their concerns, and the police start looking into this. The police were able to check her phone, her credit cards, her passports. They did numerous welfare checks throughout November 1st, and there was nothing that they could find. The apartment door was unlocked when the roommate had returned home that night, but it didn't show any signs of tampering. They did find her personal items like her purse and her wallet were still in the apartment. She had $200 of cash. Her student ID was there. There was jewelry that she had put aside with her costume near the kitchen table that was untouched. And there was no signs of distress. And one of the things that's going to come about is the police are ultimately going to do like forensics on an apartment, and there are no fingerprints or DNA from anyone unknown that they cannot account for, supposedly. They did find a diary that hinted at some social pressures that she was experiencing at the time and navigating. There was allusions to some drug experimentation, but nothing indicating any obvious single concern. The most interesting thing, or one of the stranger things about this case, is November 3rd. So this is almost 4 days removed from Halloween and the time she disappeared. 200 miles away in Philadelphia. This is about 200 miles from State College. In part of Philadelphia, a bus driver reports seeing a woman who matches Cindy's description. A young Asian female, around 5'4", dark hair, possibly in distress. He became concerned and contacted the police because he said he saw a woman in a maroon sedan around Chinatown who was banging on the window and looked in distress and was mouthing help to him. So he contacted the police, and the vehicle had sped away shortly after he made eye contact with her. He did provide a composite sketch, but no vehicle match or confirmation the police were not able to do too much with it. And the case really starts to go cold, and that's not because of lack of effort. It was initially handled by the State College and the Ferguson Township Police, where she was located. But it also, within about a week, the FBI starts to get involved because of the potential interstate foul play that was here. And so they did extensive campus searches. They searched all of the local rivers and landfills. They did over 200 interviews in the case, including polygraphs on all of her friends, the cab driver, and others that were at the party, and just nothing came about from that. There's been a lot of different kinds of rumors over the years at Penn State, whether it was tied to theories about an abduction, an accidental death and cover-up. The case file itself is supposedly almost 25 binders deep at this point, but there has been no significant development. The most recent thing surrounding this case, the parents had come to the U.S. A year later, still trying to see what was going on with the investigation from Korea. And they did put up a $10,000 reward for information. No significant tips kind of came about from that. And to this day, it's a case that has significantly impacted the international student community at Penn State University. And they put out safety flyers around Halloween just to encourage students to be extra careful because of this event. And yeah, as of the most recent update in this case was, as of October 2025, the family did some interviews recently, but 24 years later, there is no major breakthrough or evidence that has been found.
As you started talking about it, it rung a bell, because I think the family's from Northern Virginia, where I went to high school, and I do remember hearing about the case. I think I was on my way. I must have been in college or something along those lines. I don't know what I was doing back then. Who knows? But she went to, I think, a local school here, Hayfield, and then also then Randolph-Macon Academy, which is a private school out west.
Yes.
And yeah, and I just remember it hitting really hard, because it was at a time in this area where our Korean community was growing very, very large and expanding, and it was something that really landed hard here.
Reminds me of a different version of this, but like last week's case, how something horrible happened and it changed the face of trick-or-treating from them then on. After 2001, she goes missing and everything, and they heed warnings. Then every Halloween after that, it just rocked the community like all these other cases did. It changed the innocence and fun of Halloween
Yeah, and it's almost become a kind of
Creating.
warning tale. I think now they said for the first 10 years of this, they would have a vigil every single year around Halloween, kind of remembering her. That's kind of fallen off now, from what I understand. But the story itself is still kind of circulated and very mysterious.
Yeah.
There's rumors that she voluntarily disappeared, which seems kind of strange. But
No.
there hasn't been really anything of note surrounding it. So it's
no theories behind like a boyfriend or the typical.
Yeah, I mean, the people that were within her circle were, at least according to press coverage, were polygraphed and cleared, and so I don't know. Yeah, it's one of those
Who
that
done
is
it?
recent enough that it is. It's recent enough that you would think there would be some kind of information that would have kind of come forward, or kind of some way that, I mean, this is 2001, so we're still kind of technologically, there was still, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities that could have been made, but yeah, there was no DNA that they found at her apartment at the time, and
they checked like her costume. There was nothing unusual.
yeah, there was no DNA they said they couldn't account for. So
Okay.
it was yeah.
CCTV. I mean, did they have CCTV footage and stuff back then of who she would have been talking to and at the bar?
That's a great question. I don't know. A lot of universities have that now, really
Yeah,
extensively.
no, CCTV was so not a thing.
It was really
That's
grainy
been-
and
yeah.
hard
Well,
to
no,
VHS.
that was at a time where it was really, really controversial for a university to put a camera up anywhere.
Oh, okay.
Anywhere, because of like protests, privacy, all sorts of things. We weren't used to that whole idea. I remember we were piloting at the University of Maryland around that time, putting up 5 cameras in a basic corner of campus to see the way that it played out. As the reporter who had good sources in the police department, it was lovely, but I don't think everybody was in love with it.
If she went missing now in 2025 the way she did, what do you think would happen? Do you think with like Ring doorbells and security footage and
Right. And that's
surveillance,
what's hard now is
cell phone pings and things like that?
I mean, it's hard. We still have people disappear. I mean, we really do. And pretty, if a person doesn't have a phone, if you can get them in a vehicle indoors, or they can get into a vehicle indoors, there are like ways to do it. We've adapted to the times.
Yeah,
I think.
I think there has to be a lot of planning put behind it, or you have to be in a remote area, or you just get lucky.
Or she wanted to disappear.
I don't believe that. A young college girl with her whole life ahead of her. Obviously, she's probably really cute. She's a Playboy bunny for Halloween. Like, I don't know. That's just so weird. That would be so.
You heard that case in Atlanta, right? Like that case that just happened in Atlanta a couple days ago. Dentist. She very conscientious, very structured, cares deeply about her patients. Didn't show up at the office. Everybody got worried. Her husband said he wasn't home. They get to the house. The cell phone is in the house, right? And she is nowhere to be found. Her car is found across town on the other side of town. Sounds like a murder, right?
Mm-hmm.
No. Like 5 days later, they find her walking the streets hanging out with some dude. I mean,
was there a mental health break of some
who
sort?
knows? Don't know yet.
Wow.
Certainly smells like it, but people,
as soon as you said
do get up. People do get up and vanish. They really do.
Think usually there's some sort of like mental health crisis happening.
What made me think of that was when Brian brought up she was feeling some kind of academic pressure.
Yeah, there was the journal, and she did note that and some stresses related to her family, but it was so I mean I guess the other possibility is maybe I don't know if there was a suicide and they just had not found her. They don't.
Did she work? She worked, right?
Yeah, she worked actually on campus at the library, I believe, in the campus. Yeah,
it was definitely I'm just gonna throw this out here. It was a guy she met at the bar on Halloween night, dressed all cute like a Playboy bunny. She came home, she changed clothes, she was gonna go hang out with him, walk his dog with him or something like that, and then she goes missing. I mean, it's definitely something like that.
Sounds good.
Solved. Yeah.
Sounds good.
There we go.
All right.
All right.
I'm a psychic. I did not tell you this, but that's the premonition I'm getting.
That would be
All
so
right. All right.
cool.
Hold
You're
on. Kelly,
hired at that
predict
point.
what Jayson is going to do next for his episode.
Well, there are a couple.
Well,
but go on.
let me marinate on that for a little bit.
Okay, so first of all, this is the part that you should be able to predict. I broke the rules. I don't have one story. I have two stories.
Of course.
I will interconnect. I brought my own campfire sound effects.
Whoa.
That's so cool.
So we're not going to play this the whole time, but I just thought it would be a good way to start.
Well, we can.
Yeah, we
It looks
could.
like you have a campfire going on behind you, too.
Yes, this is what I'm saying. I brought the lighting for this.
Fire.
I mean, for those of you who are listening audio only, you are really missing out on some stuff. So, have you guys ever heard of the story about the cave that eats you?
No, it's not the one that's shaped like a W, is it?
No, it is not.
Okay.
It is not.
No,
so,
then I haven't.
My first story is The Cave That Eats You, The Devil's Kitchen, and an Ojibwe warning. So, I need to take you guys to Mackinac Island, which is a place of stunning beauty in Lake Huron, just north of sort of the lower peninsula of Michigan and south of the upper peninsula of Michigan. And today, Mackinac Island, it's like a resort area. Even the governor of Michigan has a vacation home there. But it was once home to Algonquin-speaking people who, based on their prophecies, had moved from like the eastern seaboard near the Atlantic to the Great Lakes region. And so turtles fit sort of at the core of the Anishinaabe. Oh, there I was going to kill the pronunciation. Now I'm going to get it right. I'm going to take your advice and do the whole confidence things. But it's the Anishinaabe people. And it's key to their origin story. So in Ojibwe cosmology, the world was created by a giant flood, right? And after the flood, this muskrat dives deep into the water, retrieves a bit of the earth from underneath the water, and that piece of earth is put on the back of a giant turtle, which grew into this island called Turtle Island that's in the Great Lakes, and eventually into the landmass we call North America. Turtle, so in Ojibwe culture, represents like stability, patience, the earth itself. So these tribes, which sort of run now from like Ontario to Michigan, Wisconsin, modern day Minnesota, North Dakota, and even all the way out to Montana, had fled to the Great Lakes region from modern day New York to one, escape the Iroquois tribes after a prophecy sort of told them to go west. And according to Ojibwe oral history, a series of prophecies known as the Seven Fires were given to the people. And basically, the underlying story of it is that the seven prophecies were sent by their creator. And these seven prophets who told the prophecies, it was known as the Seven Fires, totally appropriate for our campfire story. And these prophecies sort of guided their spiritual, physical journeys. But in the third prophecy, they were told that they would find their way to where they were supposed to go when they reached the food that grows in the water. And that food ended up being wild rice. So that's how you get the settlement of all those people around the Great Lakes. And along the way, they found this island called Madeline Island in Lake Superior, which is just north of present-day Wisconsin. And it's called the Great Turtle. It's a Great Turtle Island. But this island, Mackinac Island, is also turtle-shaped, so it became sort of a very sacred place. So it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I recommend it. Although I don't recommend going to one place in it, which is where I am going to take you go. Because not everything on the island is serene. On one of its western bluffs, where sort of like winds howl and limestone cliffs cast sort of long shadows, there's this cave with a mouth that sort of looks like a scream, actually. Yeah, a scream mouth. And the Ojibwe, they called this cave Devil's Kitchen. It's small, blackened by soot on the inside, and like I said, shaped like a gaping mouth. So tourists now pass it every day, but the Ojibwe, the Ottawa people, they said, hey, there's something dangerous here. They warned the settlers, Don't go near it. They were Americans, and British, so of course, if you warn them to not go near it, what do you guys think is going to happen? Anyway, I'll tell you what they tried to explain it to them. They tried to break it down for them, but they said it wasn't just a cave; it's a spiritual trap. This place where sort of cannibal spirits dwelled. And some said that there was this spirit, and they called it the Red Jeebus. Others linked it to the Wendigo. But either way, it was some kind of cannibalistic creature born of sort of famine and greed. And in the tradition, the Wendigo, for example, isn't just a monster. It's what you become when you abandon your community, when sort of hunger turns inward and selfishness sort of devours your soul. So the Wendigo emerges when people forget sort of the teachings of Turtle Island, the Five Fires. And it's a warning against isolation, against forgetting the land, against sort of losing the protection of your ancestors. So some people also describe them as giants, other ghostly entities, some giant spirits that straddle the both world. Either way, you want to stay away from them, whatever they are. So it was feared for its appetite, whatever it was. It would capture unwary travelers. And in the worst versions of it, and there are many, it would roast them over open fires and consume them inside the cave. Right? So the blackened walls, you're getting it, of Devil's Kitchen, stained by the cooking fires of the men who didn't listen to the Ojibwe. So one tale tells the story of a young girl and her grandfather who were stranded on the island after their tribe left. Seeking shelter, they hid in Devil's Kitchen. Starving and desperate, the girl was said to be blessed with supernatural powers, so she could split rocks and summon water. She used the gift to sort of extinguish the fires within the cave, saving herself and her grandfather from becoming the next meal. And so, modern version, likely embellished, is that the Ojibwe and the Ottawa warned the fur traders, stay away from Devil's Kitchen. But also, if you think about it, it also served another warning for them of the dangers of abandoning the indigenous people and their spiritual powers. And so these warnings weren't just spiritual, they were very practical because they're monsters in this cave. But the settlers, armed with their maps and their muskets and their land to claim, eager to map everything, tame the land, et cetera, dismissed the warnings, as you know. And so one tale passed down through oral tradition told of a fur trader who camped near the cave despite the warnings. He vanished. And by the way, this may be the answer to some of your other stories. Have you asked whether they went near caves? His dogs returned days later, trembling and covered in soot. Trader was never found. Another tale is of British soldiers who were stationed near the bluff. There was a fort that was eventually built there, and they mocked the legends. They would come report strange sounds, missing supplies, and one man wandered off never to be seen again. And so the cave still stands. Tour guides call it spooky, but for those who listen carefully, it's still whispering. Stay humble, stay connected, stay protected. Don't abandon other people. So that's story number one. And now, have you guys heard of the story of the skull that spoke too much? Silence. So this is the skull who spoke too much.
Just kidding.
Well, it's very funny you mentioned that, because I will tell you the way that I heard this story. It was as a warning to Jayson. I will tell you that this story was told to me by a relative who said, thank God you weren't born in slavery, because you would have been killed at age the moment you could speak. So, and accurate. So, moving away from those haunted bluffs over the beautiful waters of the Great Lakes region, we are going now to the shadowed woods of the American South. There's a story passed down by Black communities during slavery and Jim Crow. It's called the Talking Skull. So, man is walking through a forest, stumbles upon a skull lying in the dirt, and to his shock, the skull speaks. Why are you here? It asks. The man, totally terrified, but curious, asks how the skull came to be there. And the skull replies, I talk too much. The man runs to a local lord, or in some versions, a king, a sheriff, and tells him about the magical skull. The authority figure, skeptical, demands proof. They return to the woods, but the skull is silent. And the man's accused of lying, and he's executed. And then the skull turns his severed head to the man who's now executed and says, now you see what talking too much gets you? So this wasn't just a ghost story. It was a survival manual. So in Jim Crow, South Carolina, and during slavery, where my grandparents lived, silence was armor. So it was about not losing your tongue, betraying others, or getting yourself into trouble with words of anger. If I had a dime for every time I heard, shut your mouth around white people, I would be a very rich man. Yeah. So you don't speak up in public is the idea. You don't challenge white authority. You didn't draw attention because one wrong could cost you, your family, everything. And, here's the twist, though. Silence isn't really surrender. It's more of a strategy, right? And you can see that in other Black American folklore. Have you guys heard the story of Bear Rabbit? I can give a quick Bear Rabbit. Yes. Right. So he's not just a trickster. He's a total tactician. And in one version of the tale, there's Bear Fox, who builds a tar baby to trap Bear Rabbit. The rabbit greets it really politely, no response. Offended, he punches it and gets stuck in the tar baby. Bear Fox prepares to cook him, as any fox would do to any poor rabbit. But I don't know why he needs to cook him, but anyway. But Bear Rabbit pleads, do anything you want, just don't throw me in the briar patch. Yeah. And thinking that the briar patch is a worse punishment, Bear Fox hurls him in. But the briar patch is where Bear Rabbit was born. He escapes laughing. And that story was taught to enslaved people about how to mask your strengths, play dumb, be silent, but turn traps into triumphs. And so it was really a blueprint for the two things, right? Those two kinds of stories were a blueprint for psychological resistance. It's be silent in situations where there's nothing to gain, but flip and use trickery to buy freedom, right? Silence buys time, and then you have an opportunity to buy freedom. And so many Black American themes sort of involve that idea of using silence to buy time. There are even hoodoo tales that sort of center around that. I don't know if you've ever heard about the bottles in hoodoo tales where you fill them with different things, you plant them in your yard, and that's what's going to keep, people from coming and taking or burning your home or other things along. So again, like I said, blueprints for survival. So in closing and tying my two stories together, so whether it's the Devil's Kitchen cave, suits stained, or it's the Whispering Skull from the dirt, the rabbit outwitting the fox, or those bottles buried in someone's yard, these codes are really about sort of these ancestral things that we pass on through folklore, these messages that are hard for people to really understand because the truths behind them are actually scarier, I think, than the ghost stories. And I feel that way about a lot of ghost stories. The Ojibwe warned of what happens when you forget the land, when greed replaces kinship, when you lose the protection of Turtle Island, right? And you could give all the speeches in the world about that, but that story about that cave really lands. And same thing with Black Americans passing down these stories, that taught when to speak, when to stay silent, when to turn sort of fear into strategic victory. So different histories, shared wisdom, both traditions. I'm a big fan of ghost stories because I think they tell, or haunted stories, folklore, because they tell deeper lessons, right? Better than when we get in textbooks, they're in stories, parables, and whispers and rituals. So around our little fire, let's all remember, we're never just telling stories. We're teaching each other how to live, how to last, and how to outwit the darkness.
I love it.
Thank you.
Deeper lessons for survival.
Thank you for joining my TED Talk.
This could be an entire podcast about
I could
legends
totally
and lore with Jayson.
Absolutely. 100. You want to do it? I'm good.
Yeah,
I think that sounds fun.
What's in our podcast?
Do people go sleeping in this cave like now? Like, is it like so? We talked about some haunted locations, like when these terrible things happen, where people will turn into like a morbid destination.
People do try. Yes,
but they all die. Actually, they try, but they do not survive.
I feel like so I will be going there next summer. So I will report back on what
for a live broadcast, a live paranormal hunt.
No. I just beautiful place, and it's got a cool story. But people still try and go out there, and they still try and go into the cave, and they try to sneak into the area at night.
What do you mean try to? Do they get into the cave, or do they not?
Really unclear. No real reported stories of people
you're
back
not allowed
saying
to go
they're
into the cave?
getting in the cave. Yeah, no, you're not. You can go by as a tourist. You can go by it. You're not allowed to go into the cave. I feel like they've taken this message seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they have like organized tours going through it and stuff.
Yeah, going near it and around it. Yeah,
but not into it.
Yeah, and I think some of it's complicated by the general history, because if you look at the history of natives in that whole area, a lot of their, there is land, and a lot of their land has been checkerboarded, but many of their sacred spaces have totally been taken away. So you have this sort of tourist resort island. So yeah, it's kind of like the one spot that's still kind of, sacred. But I think there's a lesson. Yeah.
It's like traveling that balance where you're like close enough, but actually not there and stuff. You can there's tours where people can see things.
You didn't ask you didn't ask the important question, Brian. When I go there, am I going to try to go there?
Well, I assumed you were going to be sneaking in after hours there, so rappelling down into the cave and.
Is it like Area 51? Is it heavily guarded? And
when you first started talking, it reminded me of that film. Have you ever seen the film Bone Tomahawk, which is like the horror film? It's a Western horror film that stars
like most Western films.
Kurt Russell, I believe Kurt Russell.
Horror films, whether they're trying or not.
It's more recent. But what I was going to say was that part of the plot line is this. This tribe that is like kind of like cannibals. It's like I think it's the American Southwest, but like tribe, they're cannibals that live in this cave, and they've somehow kind of broken off from this other main tribe there. And there's like all these terrible things that happen when you get close to it, but they're like cannibals and stuff. And yeah, it's fairly recent. But yeah, Bone Tomahawk is
sounds like a Quentin Tarantino.
It's a pretty terrifying movie too, by the way. I mean, it's very well done. It's it's probably fairly racist and some of these depictions, but it's some of the horror in it is. But yeah, no, it reminded me of that because there was
Isn't it kind of interesting too that a lot of these stories in folklore come back to cannibalism? Like this idea of like insatiable hunger and greed and, sort of like the dangers of being separated from the rest of the people in community. I think a lot of those lessons are about community and not becoming selfish.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting because you're talking about like even the idea of cannibalization, thinking about the Joel Chandler Harris, not Joel Chandler Harris, the Brer Rabbit stories, but Joel Chandler Harris, and people like that actually recorded those Brer Rabbit stories. Those get, that was like essentially kind of like white culture kind of cannibalizing and impacting these slave stories. And then Walt Disney is eventually going to get into and adapt these, and it's fascinating because those stories, the larger kind of message and tone is quite a bit different than what you're kind of describing too.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting how, and I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but you certainly see it in like the historical stories, like Hansel and Gretel, for example, or in Cinderella when they're like chopping parts of their feet off to get them in the glass slippers. We do change these stories over time, but hopefully whatever lessons are created out of them at a given time are really relevant to pass on the right thing. I don't think that always happens with every Disney movie, but I hope that some of these lessons, carry forward.
Fun fact, when Cameron and I were growing up, in addition, I mean, we were familiar with the Joel Chandler Harris stories because that was like, like most, I think many Southern families you grew up there, like have like volumes
of course
from their parents and stuff. But in addition to that, I distinctly remember when Hardee's, I think it was, used to do, with the kids' meals where you would get the little records and the little read-alongs. We still have to this day, I could probably find it, but we still have to this day somewhere they did a Song of the South series, and it was the Brer Rabbit and the Tar Baby book and record that you got as part of your Happy Meal.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
That's probably in that storage unit that you need to clean out.
Yeah. Why don't you go check there?
Yeah, I went in there and that was like a horror movie. It was like, hoarders. So I was just going to start throwing away stuff and see if you notice. I'm so
scary. This is like,
hey, yeah, I'm on a podcast right now. Yep. You can see into my window. What are you talking about?
Well, there went Cameron.
Is this part?
So
what's up?
Then I can actually. All right. Well, on a serious note, I always wonder where movies like that came from. And I was trying to find, if there's any horror movie that inspired Scream. And then I learned about that this didn't inspire the movie because it happened afterwards, but the case of Cassie Jo Stoddart. Are y'all familiar with that?
A little bit.
One of the craziest stories I've seen in a while. And I think that it goes back to some of the other episodes that we covered where, there's like these common fears that we all have of either walking alone at night or the whole poison candy theme that we discussed on the first episode.
Fears, walking alone at night sounds like heaven.
And this one really hits on.
Are you sure you have children, Cameron? Because I'm pretty sure walking alone at night sounds heavenly.
Yeah. Well, I'm not talking about now. Now would be the I'm talking about when you're a kid and you're in the house alone, and then you start hearing, noises, and you're like,
little did I know it was my mom. Little did I know it was my mom listening to the vents so she could overhear our conversations, as I found out years later. But go on.
Ooh. Well, I've seen another story about guys in the walls.
Yes. There are a few stories about people living in the walls.
Oh, I think we're about to get one in the next episode.
Ooh, good. I was about to do one of those, but with Cassie Jo Stoddart. So she was 16 years old. She lives in Idaho in the small town of Pocatello, and she goes to Pocatello High. She's got a boyfriend named Matt Beckham. Really great student. She's athletic. She's got friends, very respectful. And her aunt and uncle ask her to house sit for the weekend. And so they've got a large home in the Whispering Cliffs subdivision, which is right outside of town, but it's kind of in a remote part. And her only job is to, just stay there that weekend, take care of the pets. They've got a dog, and, just make sure that, that the house is locked up at night. And so she decides to invite her boyfriend Matt over to keep her company, and they're going to watch a movie. and they're just about to start the movie. And then there's a knock at the door. And it's two of her classmates, Brian and Tori.
Wait.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you had to do the knock. Go on.
Gosh. Do you not have a sound effect for me?
Here you go.
All right. So they knock. And Cassie goes to the door. She opens up the door. And Brian and Tori are standing there.
What's
and they're
up?
like, I thought this was a party. And, she's not that good of friends with them. I guess Brian has a crush on Cassie, but Tori is friends with Matt. So
every murder.
Yeah. So we think what happened is that Matt said he was going to come over and, that they were going to be alone, and they figured that they were going to, just show up. But before we get into what happened, let's talk about Brian and Tori. So Brian, he's the quieter one. He's new to Idaho. He's originally from Utah. He's shy, and he's fascinated with horror movies and making short videos. And like we said before, he's got a crush on Cassie. And then Tori, he's more outgoing. He's opinionated. He's also a self-proclaimed filmmaker, and he wants to be famous. And they're both really obsessed with violent movies and serial killer lore. And they bonded over
this is hitting way too close to home.
Yeah.
Oh, their favorite was The Scream.
Yes, which is why we brought in The Mask. But so there's several videos of them going around, and they're making these videos of themselves talking about of how they want to be the next serial killers, and how Ted Bundy, he's an amateur compared to us and whatnot. Like they're, hyperinflating their own ego with this. So investigators learned eventually that they actually had a plan with about 9 potential victims. And these are all fellow students that they knew. They also learned that they had bought knives, gloves. They'd been planning this for some time. And what they were planning was to find someone that was alone in the house by themselves, which again, for me, goes back to, childhood, being in the house by yourself. That is kind of a little freaky, especially at night.
Mm-hmm.
So let's fast forward to, again, they're in the house. That knock has already happened. They've entered in, and they're watching Kill Bill Volume 2. And during the movie, Brian, he asked to go to the bathroom. But instead of going to the bathroom...
He raised his hand first. Can I go to the bathroom?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You've got
he said, I'll be right back.
Yeah. So he goes to the bathroom, or instead of going to the bathroom, he actually goes to the basement door. And this is why I would never have a house with a basement that has like that exterior door, because he goes down there and unlocks it. Then he comes back up, and they stay for a few minutes, and they're like, you know what? We're going to leave and go to a movie. Now, that sounds really stupid to me, that you're watching a movie and you're saying like, oh yeah, like we're not going to watch this movie. We're going to go into town and watch an horror movie. But allegedly that's what they say. They leave and they drive off. Well, they just drive a few streets down, and then they change into all black clothing. They've got gloves on, and then they've got these creepy Halloween masks, or like all white with blood coming out of the eyes. And they go, they park away from the house, and they walk to the back. They go through the door that they've opened in the basement. And their original plan was that they were going to start banging on some things in the basement and create a little noise. And kind of like in the movies where someone goes to investigate.
Sound effects again.
Yeah. And then they were going to wait for Matt to come down. And when he came down, they were going to kill him. But they make the noise and nothing happens. So then they find the breaker box.
Brian, Cameron, am I right that this was a house where she was staying, but it wasn't her house, right?
Right. It was her aunt and uncle's house.
And so, as I recall in hearing this story, which, by the way, bothers me more than the Slender Man story, but we can talk about that one later, that Matt was actually, they were both actually kind of concerned and worried. And I don't know if it was like noises around the house or something else like that, but they were concerned. Cassie was concerned about staying at the house alone, but I think she had to take care of the dogs or something like that. And one of the saddest parts of the story is that Matt calls his mom and asks if
I was going to get to that part.
Yeah, that is scary.
Go on. So
spoiler alert.
Yeah. Just ruined it for us.
No, I didn't. Okay. I actually set up the mystery better because I created the suspect in the investigation, and then you can come around to the end and tell us.
All right. See? So they're down there.
Don't give it up too early, man.
So they cut the lights off and on the breaker box, and this really freaks them out.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure Matt's just trying to like hold it together, be the strong dude. And Cassie is really freaking out. And Matt's just trying to rationalize it. Like, oh, well, it's probably a fuse that is blown, but he's not searching around for a breaker box. But the dog is actually going to where the basement door is and sniffing on it. So that should have been a clue.
That would be even scarier if your dog is like, there's something down there.
Right. But they're staying on the couch. Mm-hmm. So that's when Matt, like Jayson was saying, calls his mom and is like, hey, Mom, can I spend the night with Cassie? She's got to house sit and, the lights have been cut off and, she's really freaking out. And Mom is thinking, he's
terrible
just
idea.
trying to,
just trying to Netflix and chill.
Right. Netflix and chill, as Kelli would say. And
or the 500 other things that could go wrong. Yes.
Right. Either way, Mom isn't having it. But to Mom's credit, she's like, you know what? If she's feeling that scared, she can come stay at our house.
Oh, good.
And then I will
so close.
But Cassie, being the kid that she is, she's like, no, I made a commitment to my aunt and uncle about this. I'm going to make sure that their dogs are taken care of and the house is safe. So I'll stay. So Matt leaves. And after he leaves, he actually calls Tori and tells him that he has left, which some people found odd, but I guess they were supposed to hang out maybe later on that night. So it's not, I don't think that Matt had anything to do with it. But I think at that point, that's when Tori and Brian knew that, okay, you know what? It's time to make this happen. So they go up the stairs, enter into the house. It's dark out, or dark inside the house. They've got to unmask and they're carrying knives in each hand. They chase her down and stab her between.
No. This is where Batman comes out of the ceiling with Robin and saves her and knocks them out, and the police come and find just bodies. Like, no.
If
Unfortunately for her, Batman did not come.
The signal was not working.
No. And I don't know what kind of dog it was, but he didn't intervene well enough either, because she dies. And the really interesting thing about this too is, so she dies, that happens on a Friday. Saturday, Matt is spending the night at Tori's house, and he's trying to get in touch with Cassie. And he told Tori, he said, "Hey, Cassie, hasn't been returning my phone calls. She's not picking up. Can you drive me out there?" And Tori's, of course, like, no, like he gave the excuse that he didn't have enough gas. Well, Sunday comes around, and the aunt and uncle and the 13-year-old cousin actually walks into the house first, discovers Cassie in a pool of blood. And that's when the investigation starts. So, of course, once the police find out that Matt went over there that night, of course, he's prime suspect.
Mm.
Which good for them, because statistically, that's usually going to be the case.
Well, plus, even if you didn't believe he was, you got to rule him out to take the defense away.
Right.
Yeah.
So they are able to clear him, and then they start talking with people from her school, and they learn about Brian and Tori. And then they learn from classmates that these guys have been talking openly in class about killing people. But the problem is that they had been saying that that was part of our script of our new horror movie that we're doing. And so they bring Brian in for an interview, and they actually brought him in 3 times. The first time he said that he went to a movie that night and that, he didn't know anything about this. And then the second time he said that they weren't at the movie after investigators figured out that he really wasn't there. He makes a claim that, oh yeah, we weren't at a movie. We were breaking into cars that night. So the investigators say, well, that's the problem is we don't have any victims of car break-ins. So where did this happen? So then he learns that, okay, I guess they've got, my number. I'm going to confess. And I'll do the honorable thing and blame everything on Tori.
Prisoner's dilemma. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So he tells the investigators, he said, hey, what was supposed to happen is that we were going to just scare her.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the same excuse was used in our last episode of, oh, this was just going to be a prank. We were going to cut the lights out on her and then, scare her. No one was supposed to be stabbed. And then Tori just went crazy and started stabbing her.
It's a shame they Mark Twitchelled themselves, but go on.
Yeah. Well, of course, a couple problems with his story is that the autopsy shows multiple knives being used. One was serrated. The other thing is Brian actually took them to the box where they had buried the knives, the videotapes, in all the clothing that they're wearing that night. And DNA actually matched both of them.
They filmed it?
They filmed multiple videos.
Well, so these guys ran around and filmed, and they wrote scripts, and that's what I was referring to when I said they Mark Twitchelled themselves. They gave up a lot of their motive and their intent in their.
They actually made a video right after the murder where Matt goes, I can't believe I just murdered Cassie. And then you can hear Tori saying in the background, like, dude, you need to shut up right now. We need to think through this.
I think I actually remember seeing that a long, long time ago.
It's just the wildest story to me because I think that is one of those that it really does mimic the video and it plays into the sphere of being at your house at night by yourself.
And so
how does this end? Did these guys take a second-degree murder plea deal long before it goes to trial? Like, where does this go? This sounds like capital murder.
First degree, life imprisonment. Idaho doesn't really kill people.
Yeah, and then they got conspiracy tacked on for another 30 years. So they both get life in prison, and they both have been trying to blame it on each other. Interesting, Tori's parents are still just adamant that he had nothing to do with it, which is insane.
Didn't they
I mean-
supposedly have like some kind of Columbine like plan, in the sense it wasn't going to be like shoot up the school, but it was going to be like kill a bunch of people in the community? Because I know Scream inspired them,
Right.
but also the
Yeah.
Columbine shooter,
Yeah.
They sound very
Eric Harris and Dylan
Klebold-y.
And that's,
Yeah.
from what I heard, is that I believe it was Brian that wanted to do some type of like mass killing and basically do a copycat of Columbine, because they were both, as you're saying, obsessed with that. And Tori's like, no, we want to make this more of kind of like a serial killer thing. But what I think happened when they went to the door that night, I would bet that they invited people from the class to come over there that night. And it would not surprise me if their intent was to murder more people. But honestly, they just didn't have any friends that wanted to hang out with them.
Enough didn't come. So a year later, in Dnipro, Ukraine, June, July, 21 people were murdered by a group of kids who videotaped their stabbings. They were inspired in part by this story.
Was this a mass killing? Like 21
No,
people?
they spent 2 months randomly
Oh.
killing individual people, like hiking on the streets, doing other stuff, and they videotaped it all. It's a crazy story.
Do these guys in
Right.
Idaho, do they ever give like interviews? And like we've talked about the problem and motive and things like that. Like, and it seems like fairly obvious, like in
Right.
this case. But like, what do they say about this?
Yeah,
Like,
Matt
it
has.
sounds so outrageous. You just
Is that you?
Was that me? Sorry, that may
Who
have
is
been me.
that?
Yeah, I heard that too.
It's not me, is it?
No, this is
Shouldn't
good.
be.
No? Okay.
Okay.
It just sounds so outrageous. Like what do they say now, if anything, about all this? It's just,
You know, I think that is what's so disturbing about this too, is that they spent so much time thinking about this plan, and it wasn't, it wasn't like they were just running. I mean, they were running their mouth about being, the most famous serial killers or blah, 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 blah. But, to go through it now, and as far as what they're saying now, again, Tori's parents seem to be speaking out more than him.
mhm.
And they're still to this day saying that, that Brian did everything and that he was just kind of there type of thing. And like I said, Brian has, from my understanding, more or less taken responsibility for what happened and said that was kind of the worst decision he's ever made.
Oh my God!
No.
What an understatement.
Wow.
Do you know the Nora? What was her name? Nora Jones story. A couple years later, 20-something-year-old girl is murdered, and there's a suspect found. I think it was relatively quickly, but both of these guys were called, I believe, to testify in that because they or not a couple years later. She wasn't murdered. The guy was arrested a couple years later because they suspected them as a part of it, and the defense used them as alternative suspects, which just seems like the weirdest thing to me personally. But that they would agree, or they would get immunity, or what? How that potentially happened? It's just a weird case all around.
Yeah, really.
Well, it's
weird.
like one of those that gives literal fears, like, I mean, the circumstances sound more nuanced now that you've described it, but where they were kind of looking for something to tie to it versus, let's say, Scream inspiring them. But if like part of this like concern since the 80s has always been about, or really since like the rating system in the 60s with like where we get slashers and horror films, is about this like potential for like imitation and the kind of exposure to violence and stuff. And it's weird when you have these stories where it's like where people are like claiming that they were inspired by these things, because it almost seems like with the urban legends we've talked about to kind of legitimize that fear to begin with.
Well, and I also think like another way to look at it is, were they inspired by it so much as, you know, was it relatable for them? And was it just something that validated things that were going on inside of them? It's kind of like the thing we always talk about, you know, like, why do we have so many violent video games? Well, like maybe the video games being violent are just really an outgrowth of a bigger problem in society. And that, you know, if you are troubled kids like them and you see something like Scream, or you see something like the Columbine shooters, you find someone you relate to, and that just validates something that you were probably
they're looking for it. If it wasn't Scream, it was going to be something else, or a news story, or a book, or something they saw on social media. They're looking for something to relate to anyway, so could have.
And they're not relating to Sidney Prescott in this. They kind of they identified with the wrong person in the movie.
Right. Yes.
You want to be the final girl in this situation, not not Matthew Lillard or his friend. So,
all right.
Woo! That was a good one.
Yeah, it was.
That was a good one.
Crazy.
All right. Well, we're gonna wrap it up. Hopefully, everyone will join us for episode 4. We will have the same guest on. So, thank you and good night.